Sometimes the biggest tests don't happen during the battle, but right after a major victory. We're going to explore a series of really profound challenges a community faced, tests of faith, ego, loyalty, and character. So let's dive into the timeless leadership lessons that came out of all this, because they're just as relevant today as they were centuries ago. This statement right here, it pretty much describes the final destination of the journey we're about to explore. It's about a complete transformation of the heart, where faith becomes more precious than anything else in the entire world. But believe me, getting to that point was anything but easy. So the first challenge wasn't even on a battlefield. It was a battle of ideas, really, a test of ideology. It's where you see the shadows of old habits trying to creep back in, even among people who had just embraced a whole new way of life.
To get what's going on, we have to talk about something called Danat Anwat. Picture this, a massive ancient tree. In the pagan era, this tree was a huge deal. Tribes would literally hang their swords and weapons on it, looking for blessings before they went into a fight. It was a really powerful symbol of their old beliefs.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. As the army, which included about 2,000 new converts, passed by this exact tree, some of them made this pretty shocking request. They basically asked for their own version of it, a sacred object for them to use. It was like they were reaching for a familiar comfort from their past. The prophet's response here was just remarkable. You might expect anger, right? But instead, he turned it into this incredible teaching moment. He directly connected what they asked for to this verse from the Quran, drawing a parallel to when the followers of Moses asked for an idol. It's a masterclass in how to correct a serious mistake with wisdom, not just a harsh rebuke. And that's the key takeaway here. He totally understood that their faith was brand new, that their understanding was still growing. He didn't punish them. He didn't even scold them harshly. He showed that patient education is so much more effective than anger, especially when you're dealing with a belief that's still fragile and new in someone's heart. Okay, let's shift gears to the next test. This one happened on the actual battlefield, and it was a major test of ego. It was all about the psychological trap of arrogance. Just try to imagine it, an army of 12,000 strong. This was, by far, the biggest force they had ever put together. And with that huge number, a little bit of overconfidence started to creep in. Some of them felt like they were invincible, that there was no way they could lose with this kind of strength.
But that confidence, it was completely shattered. This verse from the Quran describes exactly what went down. The army was ambushed in a narrow pass, and suddenly, their huge numbers meant nothing. They were thrown into chaos and forced to retreat. It was a tough, humbling lesson that victory comes from God, not just from having more soldiers on the field.
All right, so after they managed to regroup and secure the victory, a totally new kind of test came up. And this one might have been even harder. It was a test of emotions, of loyalty, of understanding, and it all came down to how the spoils of war were divided up. So the prophet makes a strategic move. He takes the lion's share of the wealth. We're talking huge amounts, like 100 camels for a single person, and gives it all to the new converts and the tribal chiefs who used to be enemies. The thinking here was to, as the sources say, soften their hearts and really solidify their new faith. And then you have the Ansaar. These are the people from Medina who had been with the prophet from the earliest, toughest days, his most loyal supporters. And what did they get? Absolutely nothing. Not a single camel. You can just imagine how that must have felt. So of course, some of the Ansaar were hurt, they were confused. I mean, their swords were, as one of them put it, still dripping with blood, but all the rewards were going to their former enemies. When the prophet sensed this, he didn't just send a message. He went himself, gathered them all inside a tent, and decided to speak to them directly, heart to heart. And then he asked them this incredible, game-changing question. He completely reframes the whole situation. He pivots their focus away from camels and sheep and towards something so much more valuable. He reminds them of what they really had. And the impact was just immediate. It was profound. The sources say that every single person there started to weep, not out of sadness, but out of this overwhelming sense of understanding and love. In that moment, they got it. They realized that what they had could never be measured in gold or livestock. This amazing moment of emotional intelligence brings us to the next test, which is all about patience. It's about how a leader can handle immense pressure and really difficult people with pure grace. So get this. At one point, a Bedouin man, known for being pretty rough around the edges, comes right up to the prophet and rudely demands his share, saying, "Aren't you going to give me what you promised me?" The prophet just calmly offers him glad tidings. The man gets angry and rejects it flat out. So the prophet just turns to his companions and says, "Well, he rejected the good news, so you too accept it." He met that harshness with complete patience and just redirected the blessing. Amazing. And then there's the story of the defeated Hawazin tribe. After they accepted Islam, the prophet gave them a choice. He asked, "What is more beloved to you, your women and children or your wealth?" And without even a second of hesitation, they chose their families. He then used this moment to set an example for his entire army. He immediately gave up his own share of the captives and urged everyone else to do the same, promising to compensate them later. This incredible act of mercy reunited hundreds of families and showed that the real goal wasn't just to win a battle, it was to win hearts. So when you put all of these different pieces together, the test of ideas, the test of ego, the tests of emotion and patience, what you see is a really clear picture of leadership. It's a kind of victory that isn't about power, but is centered entirely on the heart. Through all these different challenges, you see this consistent approach emerge. It's about teaching with wisdom instead of anger. It's about relying on faith over brute force. It's about winning the heart, not just the argument, answering harshness with patience, and ultimately conquering with mercy. And all of this leaves us with a question that echoes down through time, right into our own lives today. What's really worth more in the end? The things we manage to take home, or the people we get to go home with?